What's going on, guys? Evan, the MTG enthusiast here, bringing another MTG deck tech. This time we're going to be looking at kind of my Cascade value pile, which is actually based around Susan Foreman, which is a 2-mana Land of War elf. The second ability, or rather the first ability, is not relevant because we're not planning to Planeswalk when we play this deck. So a little bit about the broad overview of what we're trying to do and some of the history of this deck. So before you go any further, this list is kind of meant to be like bombastic, right? A lot of big spells. We're going to do big flashy things. We're going to cascade a lot. We're going to have a good time. This is not by any means kind of an optimal strategy. I mean, there are all sorts of holes in this deck. We don't have access to counter magic because we're not in blue. We don't have access to really good low CMC cards like Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares or anything like that, right? This is just meant to, I want to resolve big spells. And we're kind of boxed in by that concept. That said, the limitations out of the way, I think this is a lot of fun. And if you're not at some sort of like CDH table or like a fast combo high power table, I think this is a completely reasonable deck to play. And I think it's not too offensive for folks at the table. And so I think that's kind of fun. So if you want a deck where you're going to do big things and you're not going to sort of offend people with a bunch of stacksy pieces, I think this is a great deck for you. A little bit about the history of this, like I promised, this started as a Ruby Daring Tracker deck, which was basically yet another like riff on a Land of War elf. And additionally, this is arguably just another variation of the Rada Heir to Kell type experience of having a guaranteed 2-drop to cheat things into the curve. I by no means think this deck is something you probably haven't seen before. It's a common concept, and so this isn't maybe my most original idea, but I think it's a fun idea. But when you look at Rada and Ruby, while they're objectively stronger than Susan Foreman, being that Susan Foreman effectively just exists as a Land of War elf with less abilities and less stats, because it's a Doctor's Companion, we can dive into any of the Doctor cards. And because I want to play this as like a big mana Cascade deck, we want to stay in red and green. And so we've got our green here from the Doctor's Companion. And so now our options were really to grab a Doctor that had some additional colors. And so blue is a strong contender because you get access to Maelstrom Wanderer and some other pieces we're not going to cover in this video. I went the War Doctor for a variety of reasons. One, we get into white, which conceptually I think is very strong for a deck like this because it can fall behind pretty quickly because it's so greedy in its design, and that white has some of the best mass removal kind of catch-up options. And so getting to white's a lot of fun. Additionally, the War Doctor has kind of a fun relationship with Cascade because if we read the War Doctor's ability here, you know, whenever the War Doctor attacks, it deals damage equal to the number of time counters, and we get time counters by cards going into exile from anywhere. And so if we grab just our top Cascade card here and read Cascade, when you cast the card, exile card from the top of your library. So basically every time we Cascade, we get a time counter on the War Doctor, and this gets us kind of some usable like removal in the command zone. And if it gets removed, we're going to have a ton of mana. Things are going relatively according to plan. And so it's pretty nice to have in the command zone as an alternate win condition or just as a repeatable removal tool. And the nice thing about playing this deck is you really couldn't care less if your commanders are removed over and over and over. It tends to be a suboptimal use of removal against this list. And so I think that's one of the charms is you sit down, you probably have to tell the table this isn't an optimized War Doctor list because optimized War Doctor lists are going to cause people to ready their powerhouse decks, which maybe you're okay with. But just something to keep in mind is I think it's worth prefacing that like we're basically playing a red-green Cascade deck with a couple white spells for fun. Okay, so what are we trying to do here? So we're trying to drop a turn 2 Susan Foreman, have a third land untapped on curve, and then we need to get into our 4-mana spells right away. And so I'm going to drop down here into our 4-mana list of spells here, and you're going to see we've got, you know, Invasion of Zendikar. This will ramp us up to 6 mana, you know, immediately. We've got Primeval Herald, which typically will ramp us up to 6 mana pretty readily, and if not, it will get us ramping. We've got the Sowing Myco Spawn, ramp. We've got Circuitous Route. We've got Explosive Visitation, Hunting Wilds, Map the Frontier, and on it goes, right? These are all just different variations of the 4-mana ramp spells. There's some more out there, but I don't really think we need to play anymore. And Path of Annihilation is also a ramp spell. And so, really, if we look at this using a calculator to give me better access to math, so we have a 98 card deck because we've got 2 cards in the command zone. You know, we've got 7 cards in our opening hand. We've got, you know, the first 2 turns. So we're going to draw, give or take, 10 cards, right? So 7 plus the first turn, plus the second turn, plus the third turn. 7 plus 3 is 10. And so if we do successes in population, and we want to draw at least 1, the number of successes in the population is, I always argue that if we go up here to my tagged ramp spells, if I can navigate the list here, the only exception would be the Confluence here, which is a 5-mana spell, so we don't want to count that one. So give or take, we've got 14 ramp spells. So if we throw the number of successes into the population and calculate, 80% of the time we are going to find the card we want. And less than 20% of the time are we going to miss and not have a good 4-mana ramp spell. And so even if we were to tweak these numbers a little bit, and so like successes in population, if this goes down to like 12, because maybe we really want one of the ramp spells and not one of the ramp creatures, which I don't think is necessary, but maybe that's something we perceive to be very important. We still have close to a 75% chance of hitting, so 3 out of 4 games. One thing this is about a mulligan type decision, you need to mulligan and try to hit that 4-mana ramp spell. Reason being is because this deck is extraordinarily slow if you don't do something on turn 4. So I would argue if you have a hand that doesn't have any 4-mana ramp spell, it's probably not keepable, which, depending on how risky you're willing to play, we've got, once again, 14 successes in the population, sample size of 8 cards. Still, give or take, 72% of the time, you're not going to have to mulligan to make this make sense. So it's not a mulligan-heavy deck, but it is the type of deck where you have to be cognizant of what's going to happen if you keep that hand and you don't hit your ramp spells. Okay. And so because our curve basically starts at 4 for all intensive purposes, we just get to load up on totally like big mana, big flashy spells. Like, we don't have anything that isn't fun to cascade into, because most of our value is going to come from Cascade. So if we start going through just the cards that are in here purely for their Cascade, you've got Annoyed Altasaur, 7 mana, very expensive for what it is, but it is a big old beater and it is going to Cascade. Of course, we have the Master of Cascading with Apex Devastator, Cascade, Cascade, Cascade. We've got the Phoenix, which, of course, if we have a cast spell with Cascade, Phoenix is going to come back to our hand, which can be a nice way to keep getting value if it's like a removal-heavy table. It isn't relevant all that often, but it is something. We've got bigger on the inside, kind of ramp once again, but not really intended as such, more of like a give a spell Cascade plus get a little bit of incidental ramp. Bloodbraid Challenger, ramp. End of the Time Vortex, ramp twice. Natural Reclamation, the only disenchant type effect that has ramp in it, Naturalize. Once again, Cascade. We're basically playing, from my perspective, all of the playable Cascades. A couple we're missing is, like, we don't have Raiding Party in here. So, for example, you could play Raiding Party. Oh, that's not it. I think it's Boarding Party. Excuse me. There it is. Boarding Party has Cascade, and just for sake of discussion here, I'm going to go ahead and put Boarding Party in my my considering pile. Because, I mean, it has Cascade, and I'm playing a lot of not amazing cards for Cascade. Discover is very close to Cascade. If we want to look at Discover here, got some rulings. So exile cards on the top of your library until you exile a non-land card with mana value 4 or less. Cast it without paying its mana cost, or put the card into your hand. So basically it's Cascade where instead of just having to cast it, you can throw it in your hand if you want to. So, big fan. Coming back here to the actual deck, we've got, and also trumpeting Carnosaur. We can, of course, if we need to, discard to deal 3 damage to something. It's occasionally relevant. So now we're going to get into something a little bit on the weird side, and this is not the focus of the deck. You should not be going for this. This should happen sort of accidentally throughout the course of the game. I think if you're trying to go for this, you're going to wind up having a worse match than if you didn't. But you've got Bloodbraid Elf and Dark Apostle. And of course, Dark Apostle lets us Gift of Chaos, which effectively gives a non-creature spell Cascade. If you use Dark Apostle or you hit Bloodbraid Elf, period, and you have the War Doctor in play, the War Doctor is going to get a +1/+1 counter equal to ultimately the total number of cards remaining in your library. Because there isn't a single card in here other than the commander itself that has anything in the 0, 1, 2, 3, or 3 slot. So another reason we don't want to play like Wild Growth, Soul Ring, Chrome Mox, all your fast mana stuff, which isn't too terribly welcome at most casual tables anyway, which is where I intend to play this. And so we can cascade down and turn this into like a one-shot on the attack. Notably, the War Doctor is not getting +1/+1 counters. Notably, you're only blowing up one player. So in terms of the I win switch type combos, this is pretty inoffensive and kind of humorous. And so I haven't had a lot of complaints about it. Any good deck needs gas to keep it going. So we've got Beast Whisperer, which draws cards whenever we cast a creature spell. We've got Garruk Pack Leader, which whenever we cast most of the creatures in the deck will draw a card. Guardian Project, basically a variation of the Beast Whisperer. Primordial Sage, same thing. Soul of the Harvest, the Great Hinge, and Vaultborn Tyrant. Now, of course, Vaultborn only hits on 4 greater, which is most of the creatures in the deck. And so if we were to disable tags here, just so I can get a nice listing of all our creatures, hits on both, hits on both, hits on both, hits on Guardian Project, of course, but misses on Pack Leader and also misses on Tyrants, and also misses on Vaultborn. So, still, though, worth running because it itself is a draw engine. Hits. Bloodbraid Elf misses, but it's mostly here for the combo. It does work on Beast Whisperer, just misses on the big guy. 3 or greater. So most of these are going to hit, right? We also have Discipline of Freyalise as part of our land package here, which we'll come back to later. Hits. Just scrolling the list, as you can see, most of these are going to hit on our triggers. And most of our things that would miss are here's land ramp and pieces like that. So very, very strong Vaultborn Tyrant here. Very, very strong. These are all going to hit most of the time. They're wonderful. We have plenty of gas to keep it going. Additionally, you've got all this card draw here. We've also got, Atali, which, of course, Atali, absolutely wonderful card. You have an alternate win condition on the flip side here. We've got Trample and Indestructible, and you've got your poison counters. So you might be able to punk somebody out if they gain infinite life or something. Also notably, this also, of course, if you have the War Doctor in play, he is going to get a counter because each of these cards is going to go into exile. Same with the Tali Primal Storm. Garruk Pack Leader, kind of already talked about. Primordial Sage. So just lots of action to keep things going. There's a lot of other things you could slip into here that would be pretty strong. For example, if you're not interested in trying to punk people out with Dark Apostle and the War Doctor, you could run a Harmonize in this slot, and cascading into Harmonize is just draw 3 cards. So Harmonize is also probably worth throwing into the considering bucket for anyone that's checking this deck out and just thinking about stuff to play. Coming over here into the flex slots, these can really be whatever you want. These are just cards that I think are pretty strong in here. You've got the Inner Sun here, Shamil, if that's how it's pronounced. So once again, you've got Discover 5, so that works well with the War Doctor. It gives you some card selection because we're going to get to dig deep. And it fights off counterspells, so if you cascade into this, you can often force a counterspell on Shamil itself. Or if it resolves, you're not going to worry about counterspells, considering it stays in play. So I think it's really strong in here. By no means is it necessary, but I think it's pretty good. Emergent Woodworm. This is pretty common in some of the RADA lists I checked out along the way, and this is just good value, right? 7 mana, it's pretty pricey, but at the same time, we tend to hit 7 mana pretty regularly, and so I'm not too terribly concerned. And when it does hit, of course, we'll be able to give backup to something in play, swing, and we'll get to potentially look at a ton of cards on this thing. It's not super good off the top, post Wrath of God or something like that, but it's pretty good in here. Gimli's Reckless Might. I'm kind of torn on this one. There's a chance it might come out. Giving our creatures haste is super relevant because we don't have a lot of ways to win other than attacking, right? The War Doctor has to attack to use his ability. We have to attack to deal damage in most cases, and not everything in this list has innate haste, and so giving our stuff haste is pretty good. Of course, we're in red-green, so there is red-green-white, really, but red-green's where this is most relevant. There's a ton of cards that would give us haste. There's some good Planeswalkers that would give us haste in the 4-mana slot, but I currently like Gimli's because it's very likely that we're going to have the Formidable trigger, and so with a Formidable trigger, this is pretty good. Having extra fights for removal is really nice because that's really what we want to be doing, just playing big creatures and removing stuff along the way and just going at our opponent's faces and keeping the value engines off the table. And so it doesn't always work, and sometimes it's a little bit underwhelming, so it is definitely one of the first cards I would consider cutting, but it's pretty strong for what it is. It's still earned its place, if you will. Kozilek, Butcher of Truth. This is just because we have so much mana, it's nice to have something on the top end where, as this is a cast trigger, we're going to draw 4 cards even if it gets countered. And, of course, we've got Annihilator 4, so this can sort of grind down troublesome permanents. And also, if it goes in the graveyard, of course, we're going to shuffle our library back in. So this can be good if you run into Incidental Mill or you're close to decking in a really long game, which has been relevant for me. I think you could play really any of the big Eldrazi here and be pretty happy, or not play them at all. I've been pretty happy with Kozilek, but you could also run like Ulamog. We could do Ulamog of the Infinite Gyre here if we want to destroy a permanent. We can run the Ceaseless Hunger here if we want to exile, 2 target permanents. Once again, indestructible. So these are both very good. And if you really want to, you can run, something, more budget friendly. Plenty of options here. So just a big guy in the top end. I like Kozilek. You do you. Silverback Elder. So this is because I felt pretty strongly that I needed more disenchants and things like that. This deck is not going to win quickly, basically ever. And so as a result, we have to be able to remove artifacts and enchantments that are giving folks that opportunity to build up board states we just can't compete with. Because while this is all very powerful, it's all very honest for the most part. And so we need to remove things that keep honest creatures relevant. This could be a Terastodon, and you'd be just fine. Basically anything that lets you destroy target artifacts and enchantments is completely fine here. I went with Silverback Elder because we also, on our triggers, can pick up lands from the library there and gain life, and life gain can be incidentally very useful. So I like Silverback Elder. The triple green can be a little bit spooky at times, but most of the time we'll be able to hit it no problem. Twin Flame Tyrant. So Twin Flame Tyrant, of course, doubles the damage. It's on a stick, so let's just keep it on a creature to trigger most of our draw engines, and it itself is a flyer. This is pretty good because, once again, we're mostly winning with damage, and so being able to double damage on triggers and things like that is really, really useful. So, once again, could come out of the list for a lot of other cards because it's, at the end of the day, it's a big mana list, but I think for 5, this is one of the stronger competitors in the slot. Probably would be towards the bottom of these flex slots I would cut, because you could cut any of these and not impact the nature of the deck too much. Xenagos, God of Revels. So once again, this is our indestructible piece here. We're really playing it for the ability, though, where target creature gains haste and gets plus X, where X is that creature's power. So this makes something positively huge. And considering we are playing a deck that, once again, needs to win with damage, it needs to attack, this is great. This is probably one of the strongest flex slots in here right now. I would definitely try to leave space for Xenagos. Zakama. So Zakama is a lot of mana, clocking in here at 9. It is the only Nea color card in the deck, I believe. So red, green, white, potentially the only one. Comes into play, untaps all lands. Once again, we've got this disenchant stick, which is really important to what I think the deck is trying to do. We can also get some incidental life gain, although not too much, because we don't have a lot of white lands, which we'll get into here in a minute. And of course, we've got removal for doing repeated lightning bolts. Works really well with Twin Flame Tyrant. Zakama and Gimli's Reckless Might are probably the two cards I'm most apt to try to find a replacement for at one point or another. They're both earning their spot. I haven't been unhappy with them. Everything in here I've tested and I've had a great experience with, but I think Zakama, and definitely Zakama, is probably on the bottom of that, like, really good cards in the flex slot. So if you've got like a pet card that you want to play, or you'd rather play like another Eldrazi or something to that effect, you want to play, I don't know, some additional sorcery or instance, whatever you want to try to fit in here, I think Zakama is probably your first cut. Not because it's bad, just because I think that there's a lot of great things you can do on 9 mana. Okay, over here into the land, I'm not going to get too far down the rabbit hole with this, but I'm going to talk about kind of a sub-theme here. But to really make it make sense, we need to talk through the highlights here. So we've got Arena of Glory, and this is a super low opportunity cost way to give our creatures haste. Once again, keep reiterating, haste is pretty important to this deck, but not important enough you want to give up a lot of deck space for it. So getting haste off a land is the ultimate kind of low-cost solution. And so we have in our ramp package over here the opportunity to get really any land we want with Sowing Myco Spawn. This is why we're playing a 4-mana land ramp that doesn't get 2 lands, whereas the rest of our ramp package, which we'll explore later, is almost always going to get you 2 lands. But Sowing Myco Spawn lets you get your choice of land, being able to get, or of course if you need a color, go and grab that. But if you don't need a specific color, Arena of Glory is almost always the target. Otherwise, we've got, our standard fetch lands here on color. I don't play off-color fetches, even though I know you can, and it makes your mana base a little bit more consistent. It just feels strange to me, so I like all of my fetch lands to be on color. Command Tower like everybody else. Commercial District, because we don't actually have any 1-drops, these Scry lands are, these Surveil lands are positively wonderful, because of course we can fetch for them, and we can throw cards in our graveyard. These are great. If you can afford them and you have them, please play them. We have a huge land count here at 41, but we do have some nice MDFCs to kind of slim it down a little bit. So Disciple and Freyalise, once again, incidental card draw, great. Often gets played as a land when you draw it early, no problem with that. We're going to skip Echoing Deeps for now. Elegant Parlor, once again, Surveil 1, wonderful. 10 Force, 10 Mountains, 1 Plains. We need to have a lot of basics because we have a tremendous amount of ramp that's all going to find basics, and once you get so many lands, it isn't a huge deal if you fail to find, but when you cascade into these ramp spells here, it really is important that you hit value at all stages of the game when you can, so I don't want to reduce the basic count too much. Then we've got kind of a sub-theme here with caves. Full disclosure, once again, I saw this on EDH Rec, and I thought it was a really neat idea for what we're doing here, so if you're the person that cares about crediting appropriate authors, I don't know if anything in Magic is truly original anymore, but we're playing these because we're playing a lot of land and we don't want to run out of steam basically ever, because we're not very good at reacting, right? We're basically playing like tap out threats. And so as a result, we've got these lands here, and then when we do the Discover 4, we're pretty much always going to hit a big land ramp spell or just something good, period. So these are great. They're super low opportunity cost to play because, once again, tap lands don't bother us too much because we reach a point where we have excesses of mana and or we've got open first turns. We're a 3-color deck, so playing a 3-color land is great. I recommend fetching this early to make sure you can hit your white for the War Doctor in case you want to cast it. We have Kessig Wolf Run because we're in Gruul colors, and so this thing just lets you win games on its own late game. Love it. Another Surveil land. Love it. Pinnacle Monk. This lets you pick up instants and sorceries, and it's pretty low opportunity cost to squeeze in here. Then we've got our hyper expensive original dual lands, but you could swap these out for temple gardens and things like that. Shock lands, whatever you need to do if you don't want to play these or proxy these. Okay, the Scavenging Grounds. The Scavenging Grounds is in here because I don't want to concede main deck space to fighting graveyards. I don't have any creatures that interact with a graveyard very well. Basically, the only way I'm going to get stuff out of graveyards is with Scavenging Grounds, and that's certainly a weakness of the list. And if you've placed a graveyard-heavy meta, I would definitely recommend cutting some of these flex slots to interact with graveyards a little bit more. I'm trying to get away by playing a singleton Scavenging Grounds, which I can fetch up with my Sowing Mycospawn. Or I can find it by, if we go through the rest of our standard good dual lands here, we get down to Urza's Cave, of course. I can use Urza's Cave to search it up as well. And then, of course, I've got some more fetches. Coming back to Echoing Deeps, and so if we have an Echoing Deeps, it can, of course, just come in as itself, or it can copy any land in a graveyard. And so this lets you, if possible, copy like one of these other sort of previously used courtyards or nurseries or volcanoes. I like it a lot. One thing is, unfortunately, if Scavenging Grounds is sacrificed, it will see itself in the graveyard and get exiled, and so you can't Scavenging Grounds and then plan to pick it up later with Echoing Deeps because it will exile itself. So I think this is still worth playing in kind of the Caves package, but you could definitely consider cutting Echoing Deeps for another land. I would not go below 41 lands in this list. I think that's a mistake. Ramp package here, Circuitous Route. We don't have a gate. This is just to get 2 basics. So, Cosmium Confluence. This is, of course, more interaction for enchantments, which is pretty common where I play, and I think pretty common in general. And who doesn't like to blow up some Rhystic Studies? Cascading into this off a 6-mana spell is pretty great, because you're going to be able to, if you blow up any troublesome enchantments, or we can go get 3 caves. And so getting a triple ramp into your 3 hidden Courtyard, Nursery, and Volcano, or get your missing White Source, or get Echoing Deeps, strongly recommend it. Hunting Wilds, once again, these are just ramp spells. An important piece about when you're ramping to make sure you don't run out of targets, and of course you're hitting your colors, is to think about Explosive Vegetation, we have to get 2 basics. Circuitous Route, we have to get 2 basics. Invasion of Zendikar, we have to get 2 basics. By the way, the flip side of this is pretty good, so it's usually worth attacking it to get it flipped for you. Map the Frontier, of course. Now, Map the Frontier can get a desert, and so you'd want to get Scavenging Grounds and another spell in most cases. Migration Path, if you haven't cast it earlier, you're probably going to cycle it. And so the piece to think about here is, honestly, read the ramp you're casting and make sure if you can get force cards to go get dual lands, the surveil lands, or other pieces. Because if it doesn't say basic, you can get any forced, which kind of preserves these basics for your less flexible explosive vegetation and circuitous route. Plus, you just get a lot more utility by finding the lands that are special in some way. So, really recommend. Overlord of the Hauntwoods. I characterize this as a ramp spell, but it's a 6/5 for 5, which is pretty well costed. You can also do a 3-mana impending on this if you need to. And so this, of course, will create you your tap cost land token named Everywhere, and over time this tends to make lots of mana as it continues to attack open players, or it forces a removal spell, which isn't a bad thing, because when it comes in, you're going to get one either way. So I've been really satisfied with it. I think it's a great inclusion, but once again, you could cut this for another ramp spell, and you probably wouldn't see much difference in how the deck performs. Path of Annihilation, and so this is another ramp spell, of course. And we treat it as a ramp spell. We get our 2 Eldrazi here. So this thing's pretty wild, because when it comes in, you're going to get your 0/1 Eldrazi spawn creature tokens, and we can sacrifice them, but we also can now tap them. And so if we cast this on turn 4, theoretically, on the next turn we can play a land. So you've got maybe 5 mana there, tap your 2 Eldrazi 6/7, and sack 8/9. So, a ton of mana off this and pretty much cast whatever's in your hand. And if they want to remove your tokens or disenchant this, probably not worth it for them overall. So that's the other thing about this. A lot of these creatures and spells and things, removing them isn't a big deal for you because nothing in here is so synergistic that if you lose this piece, something else doesn't work. You just keep casting big spells. So as long as you don't run out of gas, you're pretty much always in there. Primeval Herald. This usually winds up getting you 2 lands. Usually gets to attack more than once. If they want to burn removal on it, that's fine. Ranger's Path, 2 lands. Skyshroud Claim, 2 lands. Sowing Myco Spawn. Get the best land that you need at any given time, which most of the time is going to be Arena of Glory unless you're missing a color. And Vastward Surge, 2 lands. So lots of land ramp. Once again, the whole plan is to get to 4 mana, cast your ramp spell, go crazy. Finally, getting down here into our removal packages. Okay. One of the reasons we're in white is it's still really easy to fall behind in this list. Some players at tables just want to watch the world burn. I assure you, it is not at all a good use of your opponent's resources to counter Susan Foreman. It is not a good use of your opponent's resources to counter your turn 4 ramp. That is not the way to beat this list. It is not the way to engage with this list in most cases. But maybe you're playing at a table where it's like Talrand and they just want to counter everything anyway. Maybe it is like a type of player that has it out for you, or maybe they're just scared of you. Whatever the case may be, it's possible to fall behind, right? Or you get your land ramp going, your first big threat gets removed, the table's playing fast, people have drawn their soul rings, which you don't even have access to, and so it's a tough day, right? Because you're in white, you have access to Austere Command and Farewell, and potentially more Wraths if you really want them. And so Farewell, of course, is the best board wipe currently available in Magic from my perspective. It is so flexible. We can clean up really any sort of board state that we just can't compete with, or we're not confident we can come back from. And of course, depending on what we actually have to exile, this will put counters on the War Doctor. So really, really like Farewell. Austere Command, same premise, right? Because we get to choose our modes, it's possible we can make these one-sided board wipes. We can blow up the things that really matter. We don't have a lot of artifacts or enchantments, and typically when we lose them, it's just not the end of the world for us. A couple cards I failed to mention earlier. I just want to take a quick revisit here. Vaultborn Tyrant is really sticky. Once again, more of that incidental life gain. And so this is a great card. And the Great Hinge, of course, also pretty much good in every green deck, right? Incidental life gain and a little bit of counters and drawing cards. So big part of the package I pointed out earlier. And they're just, honestly, just good cards if you're in these colors and you're not trying to win quickly. Call forth the Tempest, which is another Wrath of God effect. Only we're going to Cascade off it a couple times. So Cascade, Cascade. And so this is an awesome card. I really like it in here. And so we've got 3 board wipes that are pretty reliable. And we could, in fact, get additional board wipes into this deck without having to sacrifice too much. And so I think that's a great way to play these types of lists. And that's why I went into the War Doctor as opposed to something with blue for, of course, the strongest color in Magic. Also want to point out briefly that we also have some other removal here we'll get into. So Drakuseth, Maul Flames. When this card gets to attack, it's positively wonderful. It works really well with a lot of things in the list. It's hilarious with Twin Flame Tyrant. With Xenagos, of course, we give it haste. If we have a haste enabler, I have never been disappointed in this card. When we don't have a haste enabler, pretty much gets removed instantaneously and you played 7 mana for nothing. I think he still earns his spot, but there is a decent probability he will disappoint you in a lot of games. But any removal spell is value unto itself. Gruul Rage Beast, so once again, 7 mana, but when it comes into play, it's going to fight something, and we're in green-red for the most part, so most of our removal is in the form of a fight spell. The thing that's kind of a drag about this is it isn't a May ability, so we're going to have to fight. So there are some board states where you're going to have to fight things that are going to kill your creatures, like Indestructible, Big Beaters. It's really disappointing. And you have to fight an opponent controls too, so you can't like fight your own stuff. A potential cut for that reason. I still think it's worth playing. But if you want to make room for the additional Wrath effect, I think Gruul Rage Beast is a decent cut. Or if you want to play some of the alternate cards we'll get towards the end, I think this is another decent cut to consider. Kolgla and Yadaro, once again. Fight creature, also a disenchant. And then, of course, we gain Trample and Haste when it comes into play if you want it to. So, pretty good. Once again, we've got more of my disenchants. Of course, we only get to disenchant if we have haste, but we do get to fight either way. So, big fan of Kogla, and with it, the haste enablers can really come through for you. It's too bad it's 7/6 and not just one thing bigger, because once again, it's just a little bit under Gimli's threshold here, which is really too bad. Let the Galaxy Burn is in here purely because of Cascade. But fortunately, we have so much mana in here that you can often cast Lets the Galaxy Burn and wipe the table again. I wouldn't consider a reliable Wrath. It takes a lot of mana, and so it's not necessarily super good if you're behind. It's more of... it's in here for the Cascade, right? You're not necessarily going to get a lot of value on it in terms of the Wrath effect. Still worth playing. I wouldn't cut it, but understand that it's not something you should count into your math for coming back when you're behind. Noise Marine, this is in here because once again we have Cascade, and at 5 mana we're almost certainly going to Cascade into a ramp spell or some sort of value engine. And it's a little bit of removal. It usually winds up being, you know, two spells typically off the Cascade. So it's a shock. It's a 5 mana shock that gets you a 3/2 with Cascade. I think it's worth playing, but it's definitely one of the least efficient Cascades in the deck. Definitely a spot you could cut if you wanted to play something else. Screamer Killer, whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 5 or greater, Screamer Killer is 5 damage to any target. We have a lot of creature spells with mana value 5 or greater. And so this basically winds up being a 5/5 trample for 5 that throughout the rest of the game is going to let you, fire off 5 damage pings from this guy, including people's faces. So also synergizes really well with, of course, the Twin Flame Tyrant. Terror of the Peaks, an absolute classic. So once again, Terror of the Peaks will deal damage equal to the power of any target of a creature that comes into play. We have a lot of big creatures with a lot of power, and so this is just removal on a stick. It's really strong. Thorn Mammoth, just another fight stick for 7 mana. Once again, it's not a May, so we are going to be fighting a lot, and so it's really important that you try to keep those indestructible giant creatures to not be the last creature on the board, because you're going to be in trouble if that is the case. Although, if that is the case, the board is mostly empty of creatures, so there's a chance you're going for kind of your own win at that point. I've talked about it a couple times, and I don't want to overemphasize it as though it's a frequent occurrence. Tyrant's Familiar, because your commander is almost always going to be in play, and it's so low cost to recast. Tyrant's Familiar is actually really strong at, a 7/7 for 7 in almost every use case, and getting to deal 7 damage is a pretty strong removal spell in most cases. So I would play Tyrant's Familiar over, Draku Seth if I had to choose one or the other. And lastly, rounding out the list here, we have Volcanic Torrent. Once again, it's another removal spell. It's really strong against tokens. You get the Cascade off it. It's worth playing because of the Cascade, but I wouldn't count on this to reliably remove a lot of troublesome permanents. Come down here into our considering pile. There's a lot of cards that aren't in the considering pile we could absolutely play. We've got Geological Appraiser. This would, once again, because of the way Discover 3 would work, we would basically give the War Doctor equal the total number of counters in the library, and it's another one of those, hit the button, I wins. Unfortunately, it's a 3/2 for 4. It doesn't have haste like Bloodbraid Elf. I think it's honestly pretty bad here. It's good for the combo, and that's all it's good for. I don't think it's worth playing just for that. I actually cut it for Dark Apostle, which this is a little bit more flexible and will be more apt to give you value even without War Doctor. And of course, Zendikar Resurgent. This is a 7 mana enchantment, and we can cast a creature spell to draw a card, and we can tap it for lots of mana. Very strong in here, but it isn't a creature itself, and I'm trying to get as many creatures as possible. It's too much mana for me to play it over the Guardian Project. I think this is stronger, but I could definitely see myself playing it over like Garruk Pack Leader. In fact, that would be my cut for it, right? If I want to cut something, I would either cut Garruk's Pack Leader or Beast Whisperer, leaning heavily into Garruk's Pack Leader, or I'd cut a random flex card out of here, like Emergent Woodworm. I could probably cut, considering this is the same mana and very much designed to get you value. I actually prefer the Woodworm currently, but if you own this or want to play this, it slots right in. Omnath, sure. Great creature, a lot of value, lots of pings when it dies. Really like it. Potentially could replace Zakama at one point or another. Zakama untapping all your lands is really relevant to get to cast 2 spells on the turn you play Zakama. But Omnath also very good, and a lot of synergy with getting the 5/5 elemental tokens. A lot of synergy on the damage with Twin Flame Tyrant. A lot of synergy with some of the card draw stuff here. Although not all of it, because once again, you're making tokens here and you're not casting. Flargan Nasari, or Nessari, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. This is interesting because you get card advantage, but you don't get card advantage the turn you play it. So you have to wait for your next upkeep to come around. Now, all the cards that get exiled here are going to boost the War Doctor, which is kind of a cute synergy. And you get to cast these for free, but you don't always get to choose what you're casting. And there's some limitations with it. I think it's pretty strong, but I also think that at 5 mana, we've got a lot of strong choices, and I probably wouldn't play this. It's more cute than it is good. Verdant Sun's Avatar. This is really... I played this on the list previously, and I actually replaced it with Vaultborn Tyrant. This is very good. Being able to gain lots of life late in the game is often game-changing, and so I do really like it. That said, though, you're talking 5 mana to gain 7 mana to gain some life, and so I think there's enough life gain as is. But if you start tweaking the list here, it's possible you may need to throw this back in to get your life gain back where it needs to be. Firelit Thicket. I have not needed it to stabilize my mana, but if I was looking to stabilize my mana further, I would probably play Firelit Thicket to hit my double greens and my double reds more consistently. So, Lazotep Quarry. This is a desert, and so this can be pretty useful in here because effectively, if we have Lazotep Quarry, then we can sacrifice it to the stomping or to the scavenging grounds. We can also sack our own stuff, of course, in response to Gilded Drake or something like that. And of course, it can sacrifice itself to get something out of our graveyard, make a token. It's pretty good. Arguably, I could definitely see swapping out Echoing Deeps for it, especially because then when you do your desert cycle here on Map the Frontier, you can get 2 deserts and hit the graveyard twice if you need to. I might have just talked myself into it. I think I'm going to go ahead and move that to the main deck. And I think I'm going to go ahead and cut Echoing Deeps, actually. I think I'd rather play Urza's Cave over Echoing Deeps. But I'll still move this to considering, because there's a world where you could play both or neither. Ondu Inversion. And so this is a super low-cost Wrath of God. It's a tap land. And if you want more Wraths in your list here, you've got a Destroy All Non-Land Permanents for 8 mana. It's a ton of mana, but you're likely to get that mana in this list, and so you could definitely cut maybe Hidden Courtyard, or maybe just pull out a land in general, and you can probably still hit your colors, because we're not too greedy on the mana base. Maybe pull out your Urza's Cave for it, depending on what you want to do. Boarding Party, we just talked about, we just added. Terastodon, we don't actually have anything that destroys target permanent, so destroying target non-creature permanent, 3 of them, can be really good. I could definitely see Terastodon coming in here into a flex slot over maybe Zakama. And we already kind of talked about these Eldrazi that I peeked at earlier. If I was going to play another Eldrazi, or something over Kozilek, I'd probably play Ulamog of the Ceaseless Hunger, because I am all about exiling 2 target permanents. That way, if something's indestructible, which I don't have a great way to deal with beyond Farewell, you know, I have a way out, which is Ulamog here. And this is another destroy effect, but having the Annihilator 4 and having the shuffle effect are pretty nice. But if you don't want to play Kozilek, I think that your move is probably to play Ulamog instead. And of course, Harmonize. Harmonize is great. You could play Harmonize kind of anywhere in this list. One other card that isn't currently in my considering that I think is worth taking a look at is Pit of Offerings. Because once again, we struggle with graveyard stuff with this list a lot. And so Pit of Offerings here, if we move that to considering. Pit of Offerings, when it comes into the play, it of course can remove 3 cards from a graveyard. It's also searchable with our 5-mana ramp spell, which I really think is cute, so I'm trying really hard to make this work. Alright, cool. So let's go ahead and get this back to regular Zoom. We've kind of talked through every card on the list, broadly what we're going for. Let's go down here into Let's Play Test. Let's give it a shot. And so looking at this hand here, we've got, I'm actually going to zoom this a little bit. Oops. 100 looks good. So we've got 3 lands here. We don't have a ramp spell, so I'd probably take my mulligan here. So we've got our ramp spell, we've got 3 lands. This is a keeper. So first turn, we got a Keswick Wolf Run, go basic land. Next turn, turn 2, we've hit our white. We can go Susan Foreman. Next turn, turn 3. So we'll go here, forced. Sure, doesn't matter too much, honestly. And go Map the Frontier. And so I would want to go here, and I'd want to get my mountain, because we're a little bit short on red mana for some of our cards. And then I'd also want to get Scavenging Grounds, because this is a desert. Perfect. Next turn. Oh, we hit more ramp. And so now we're up to 6 mana, 7 mana on turn 4, if all things are going according to plan. So a couple things we could do here. We can, of course, play a Bloodbraid Challenger and Cascade, probably hit another ramp spell, which is pretty good. We can go into Garrick's Pack Leader to start drawing cards. We can go into Tuatali. We don't have a way to haste it, though. It's almost certainly going to get removed. Or we could go into Coliseum Confluence, and provided there's no enchantment we have to destroy, we can hit trips, deserts, and really get the ramp going here, which is pretty good. And so, depending on what the board state was, if I was under pressure, I would probably Bloodbraid Challenger. If I wasn't under pressure, I would just continue to play as greedy as possible and go Cosmium Confluence here, view library. And we can go get a bunch of caves, excuse me. So really they're all called hidden, and so I'd probably at this point just get my 3 hidden lands and go next turn. So we're on turn 5 here. We've got an absolute pile of mana. So we've got 11. I would probably at this point go 5, because I want to start drawing cards here. So 5. 5's 10. Could also go 5 and 6. And that would also be fine. 6 plus 5 is 11. I'm struggling to do math for whatever reason. And I would probably do this one right here. I'd probably offer this up, get my dude out, and then at that point, be as mana efficient as possible. Go Atali. If it comes into play, you get your card. You have an Atali chilling here. And go next turn. And so, I mean, we'd be running into all sorts of responses and removal, and this would not be what this looks like in a typical game. But, in the interim here, since nothing is going wrong in Goldfish World, we can go here and continue to ramp the plains. I'd probably still get another mountain here. These are tapped. We've got so much gas here because we've got these courtyards if we really need to go somewhere. So at this point, we've still got 8 mana up, so I'd probably do this. Hit this, draw. Get Arena of Glory, very nice. And then we'd also Cascade. Miss, 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 miss. Nope, Path of the Animist is a hit. And so you could move these to the bottom of your library. Shuffle, shuffle, view library. And then we go get probably 2 forests. I believe this is 2 basics. Yeah, just get 2 forests at this point. So, like I said, giant piles of mana with this deck. Reign of Glory here is definitely the land. That way we can give something haste if we need to. You know, we could go Suicune Refuse, Cascade, hit this. So 6 and 5. And then we've got enters the battlefield, so that enters the battlefield. That enters the battlefield, so what? 2 cards. 3, 4, 5, 6. And we probably go Sky Shroud Claim here, which lets you get untapped forest. So view library 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Probably go. You don't want to get your basics at this point, right? So I'd probably go like Taiga, and I'd probably go Stomping Grounds. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Get this dude going up in here. I'll draw a card. Shimmel, pretty good. Untap land. And so at this point, you know, it's turn 8. We've got a bajillion mana, tons of stuff in play. We've got triggers coming on here. We've got a bunch of Cascade triggers. We've got access to Dark Apostle, which we can now actually cascade if we want to. And we've got the War Doctor, and we've got the combo. So if we want to just have fun with this, I'd probably say, okay, you know, tap 4, 5, 6. You know, attempt to resolve this. See if we can bait out a counterspell or resolve it. Either way. And then we'll tap 4 again. We'll go War Doctor. Or rather, it'd probably be better to do something like this to exert it. It gets haste, which is important here. And then we could go, of course this came into play, so we can trigger this again. This came into play, 3 or greater, so we can draw this card. And we can go Bloodbraid Elf. Bloodbraid Elf will trigger this, draw a card. Cascade, Cascade the library. This is hasted, gets infinite tokens, somebody dies. And we still have gas in hand with Yadaro and Dark Apostle and things like that if we want to try again with War Doctor on the next turn. Oh, pretty good. We'll do 1 more Goldfish here. 2 lands. We do have 2 ramp spells. We have a ton of lands in the library, but we don't have green, so I take my free mulligan on this one. So we've got 2 lands in 1 color. I'd probably mull this also. We'll try this for fun, but I think that this is probably not a keeper. So I'll go Forest. Yikes. Go here. This is a pretty bad draw, honestly. But still, you could flip card here, go like that. And then for this one, I'd be inclined to go get 2, right? So I'd probably Explosive Vegetation here, go Library. And I probably wouldn't even bother with the Plains at this point. I'm not going to be casting the War Doctor right now. So turn 4, not looking so good. Didn't hit a organic land, which kind of slows us down considerably. But you'd probably still want to just keep slamming your ramp. So go here. We can get 2 forests, so I'm going to go get Jetmir's Garden here, which is a forest. And then I'd probably also want to get a Commercial District, honestly. Tapped. And that lets us, whoops, hold up. 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, I probably wouldn't take the Sakama because we don't have the land to hardcast it, and so we'd tragically have to bin it. Next turn, we hit an austere command, which is probably exactly where we want to be at, but we're missing a white, which is probably why I should have gotten a white earlier. That's okay, though. We can go for our Mycosan sowing a Myco spawn, and that'll search our library here, which will presumably let us get a savanna or a plateau. I'll probably get a plateau here. And then we'd have, 5 mana open. We're probably in a pretty bad way, so hopefully folks aren't too worried about our janky deck. And then we could go this in Cascade. So this is 5, so this is a miss, this is a miss. Okay. So Vast would search. So search library for 2 basic band cards. Bottom of library, view library. So once again, at this point, you can get your basic planes, and you can get your forced. Shuffle. Next turn. Let's put that back on top because we would have rebounded this. We would hit this. Great. And we'll Cascade again. Great. So view library. 2 basics, and so one forest mountain. So no problem getting mana, right? So we're on turn 6. We still have 9 mana, so pretty good. 10 mana actually. And then was probably where we're going to try to catch up here with either a farewell or an austere command, with whatever's more appropriate. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana left. So austere command. We're going to assume that we had to blow up our stuff here. So that seems likely. So Susan Foreman's probably never going to get recast, honestly. And then these would go to the graveyard. At this point, we could either go War Doctor, which would be fine, or we could even go this dude to go get another land. Just try to keep getting the lands going here. I think I'd be pretty apt to go with this guy, actually, so I can go to my library and go get another mountain tapped. Next turn, this into play tapped. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Slam this guy. Fight something. Attack. Go get a tap mountain. At this point I'm just grabbing lands at random, honestly. So we've got 6, so this is 3 mana. Play that. And we can do this, this, and this. And then we can get the War Doctor and get a +1/+1 counter on it. Draw a card. You can draw a card again. And so we aren't hitting very well right now, and so I would probably go ahead and do this tapped to scry. Go ahead and dumpster that. And then we can 2, 3, 4, 5. We can go here and discover 4. So we need to find 4. So counter on War Doctor, 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 counter on War Doctor. There we go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Bottom of library. And I would go ahead and cast the Ranger's Path. Get my commercial district. Actually, I can't. So let's see. Still want to go for duels if we can at this point, right? So I'll grab the Savannah. That's a forest. So really any stomping grounds would be fine. Sure. So this has got a ton of counters at least, so that's pretty cool. Didn't draw creatures, so still can't cycle with Great Hinge to keep the action going here. So next turn, hit the Kozilek, so we're in there. 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 9, 10. Kozilek. Draw a card from that. Draw 4 cards from Kozilek's ability. Now we've got, infinite gas. We're ready to go. Trigger this off of this. And this would have been attacking, getting more counters. In a pretty good place. Also, ironically, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 mana. And so we could go... like you could do like this guy here, for example, for 4, 3, 4, 5. Then you could actually cast this. And you'd Cascade again. War Doctor grows. War Doctor keeps growing. War Doctor keeps growing. War Doctor keeps growing. There's actually going to be a huge War Doctor from this. So there's 4. Ranger's Path. So that'd actually be a pretty large wrath at that point because we hit so many... we had so much mana to cast spells along the way. So let's go bottom of the library. What's pretty interesting here is we missed a couple land drops. This probably wouldn't have been a very good game for us. But that said, we've actually drawn out pretty well here. We've hit a lot of ramp. So coming up on the hour mark, probably want to wrap up this video here. Let's just look at this starting hand. And this is exactly what we'll be looking for. Sure, draw your hand, get your white mana, go next turn, get your forced, get Susan Foreman, go next turn, get your 3. Then I'd probably map the frontier in this situation. And then I want scavenging grounds, and I'm going to want a forced, actually. So next turn, turn 4, hit the mountain. It's actually really good. So you've got Beast Whisperer here, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, I mean, you usually want to get something on the table, so I'd probably do this guy. 4, 5. Tap out. Get your Cascade going. Hit Xenagos. That's pretty good. Go to combat. Target creature gets +X and haste. Where's that creature's power? So 6, so 12. 12 haste on turn 4. Got a Cascade off at 2, pretty good. 2, 3, 4, 5. Still not quite a creature on Xenagos, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Next turn. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Regrettably, we have hit a lot of lands and a lot of creature spells at this particular moment. So I'd probably cast this first. That way we can go here and get a commercial district. And so we can get a lush portico. Because we really need to get something up in here. Like, we don't need more ramp. Kessig's very good, but we actually wouldn't want Kessig here. And then we could even from there, honestly, play that for land for turn. I'd probably still bin it, even though it is gas in its own way. And then 2, 3, 4. Get this going up in here. Right click on the wrong thing. Add token. Get my Eldrazi spawns. As clunky as it feels, it's still turn 5, and we've actually got a pretty strong board state. So we go next turn. Dude. Alright. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can do this thing and put it on. It doesn't really matter. This, 2, 3, 4, and cast this dude. And so because we cast it with this, we would have Cascade, which is at 4, right? So we'd be a guaranteed miss. So arguably, if we had one more mana, we could actually probably just go nuts with it and do the War Doctor. But we could also just not give it Cascade at this point and just... Well, wait a minute. Let's play better Magic, huh? Said, pretty good to end on this note if I play correctly here. So this is 5 mana. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's do something like that. Put that on that. Tap that and tap that. And then let's tap this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's do this guy. And we've got, this adds 2 mana, I believe. And Cascade. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Play War Doctor. Now we get our Cascade trigger. And we draw a card here. Our Cascade will miss, and so this will be an enormous thing. Go Xenaghost trigger. Give that haste. Swing. Kill a player. So turn 6, we wiped out a player and have a completely reasonable board state. And this is also turned on now because we've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Plenty of cards. And if the game hadn't ended there, we've still got the option to go sort of mountain here. And now we've got a ton of cards. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We can go 7 if we really want to. And then we can go Tyrant's Familiar. And we start cascading. Terror of the Peaks. Whenever you cast. So this is a cast. This is a cast. So draw 2 cards. And then we've got Tyrant's Familiar and tons of mana still. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Carnosaur. So no Cascade, so we can do, and this is Discover 6, 5, I believe, so we need to find something with 5. That's 6, misses. Oh, Noise Marine, that'll work. Noise Marine comes in, we would cast that. And then because we cast that, we get a whole bunch of triggers. Terror of the Peaks trigger. This is its own trigger. This is a trigger to draw a card. Draw more cards. So at this point, I mean, between the lands and the drawing of the cards here, you know, we're going to go absolutely nuts. Like, it's a fun deck. It's very explosive. It's very fun. But also, admittedly, it can feel a little bit clunky at times, and that's okay. So I think if you give it a shot, you won't be disappointed. I've never not had fun with it. So I hope everyone enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Sorry we ran a little long, and I'll see everyone next time.